Good evening, welcome to another amazing edition of Beyond the Numbers live here in our studios here in Kukumimle in Accra. My name is Winston Taki and I'm doing this today with Caleb.
Winston, good to be here.
It's good to see you, always a pleasure.
As well.
Today, our main man is all around a little bit. So today, the mantle is on your shoulders. Anyways, interesting enough, we're going to be delving and assessing the first quarter of 2025, basically assessing the key economic indicators and performance of the government. We'll check on inflation. We'll check on the price of gold on the international market. We'll check on how the cocoa sector has performed so far. This will be based on data from the Bank of Ghana. So join us right now as we go into the numbers and bring you up-to-date information as on what is really happening on Ghana's economy. We'll also, in the course of the program, activate the phone lines for you to call and let's hear what you have to say. And we always advise that let's make sure our opinions are clean and, you know, the language is a bit acceptable on screen. Now let's go back to the numbers and see. First, we start with inflation. Caleb, what do you have to say about that?
So inflation has been a big deal.
Yes.
And then, you know, from 2022 thereabouts, where it peaked at almost 54%, it's been coming down since then, but it's still elevated. And when the recent monetary policy meeting, the Bank of Ghana actually increased the policy rate by 100 basis points. Because inflation, they will not believe that inflation is tightly under control. That was one of the reasons that some of the central bank gave. Yeah. So inflation is still a problem because it's still elevated. It's, as you can see, it's way above there since 2003 thereabouts. You know, so it's still around 26%. However, it's important to note that the inflation rate has dropped for the third consecutive time. That's from January, February, and March. This is the third time that it has dropped, and it's the lowest within the past 5 months. So there's some respite, but it's still elevated. And food inflation is still higher than the average, the normal inflation, the overall inflation, which means that we have to tackle food inflation more.
There has been conversation about how much food prices can best be elevated and ensure there's maintenance in that going forward, especially in the northern part of Ghana, upper east, upper west regions. The price of commodities keep increasing there. Yeah. And if you look at the inflation basket, you see key commodities like yam, tubers, and even surprisingly, dog meat is even expensive.
It's always
in the basket. And you see fried fish, smoked fish. All those are becoming quite expensive these days when you go to the market. And these always reflect when we assess how much these are on inflation. And if you look at a trend here, we realize that in 2016, it was hovering around 20% in terms of inflation. Yeah. But this particular issue, that is between 2022, where we start seeing rocketing inflation, to between 2023. And these numbers tells us that that time inflation was difficult to be handled to the extent that we saw some of the Ministry of Agriculture send foodstuff to some particular market because the prices was beyond understanding. The middlemen were making sure that the prices were high. Blaming transportation costs as a key issue. And indeed, if you look at the inflation trend, transport consistently was then in 2023 in the first three factors pushing inflation higher. Yes, this is the numbers of inflation. Although I was projecting possibly that if they had reviewed the MPC, certainly we would have seen a marginal depreciation in inflation, but that is not what we experience. Yeah,
but when we're talking about the transport costs, it's interesting because you know the price of crude oil on the world markets has come to all-time lows. It's about $56 per barrel now, down from $90 per barrel.
That's interesting.
That's interesting. So it means that if this is maintained, and also because, you know, Donald Trump's tariff policies and then OPEC has begun to increase oil supply in the market, if this continues, the prices of the pumps in Ghana should go down.
It should go down.
It should go down.
So in the next pricing window, it's likely we should be seeing a marginal drop.
Exactly.
In
we
price
should be
of
seeing
goods.
this, yes, because the price of crude oil on the world market has been dropping, and it's now below $60 a barrel. So doing the permutations, and if you look at the cedi stability on the market as well, the cedi has been quite stable, and we'll get to that. So if you look at all these things, it should feed into the next pricing window, and then the inflation is going down.
So certainly, viewers, we're expecting that to happen on our market very soon. If you go to the next fuel pricing window, which is possibly next week, we should be seeing some indicators there which will reflect on at the pumps, basically. Now, we want to see one very interesting aspect of the report that was released by the Bank of Ghana, which tells us from January to February alone, we want to access the amount of export that we have done in February. Yeah. One thing that is very important that I can see is the red bar you see at the left side of the screen, which is 2025. You see we have 4.3 number there, followed by 2024, we are 2.8. Caleb, the jump is huge.
Yeah.
Is it a normal trend?
Yeah, so as you can see from the trend, this is just January and February exports. Latest. So January plus February, how much we exported, the revenue we've gotten. If you look at the trend from 2016 to 2024, before this year, you can see it's very stable, around $2 billion every first 2 months of the year, 2.5, 2.7, basically around that side throughout the time. But then this year, we have seen a jump, a very big spike. It's now 4.3 billion for just the first 2 months of the year. And that's more than 60% or so higher. And that's interesting. But also because if you look at the baskets of goods, the exports.
So some would say we have experiencing some sort of trade surplus.
Exactly, yeah. I didn't really check the trade surplus, but I think so, yeah. But if you look at the basket of goods that we are exporting, and you see gold inside, then that should tell you why this is very high. Because gold price on the world markets has gone up exponentially. It just crossed the $3,000 mark a few weeks ago, and it keeps going up. So if this trend is maintained, our exports this year is going to go up so much.
One would say, whilst the galamsey keep increasing, certainly we should be expecting this figure to go up. But the key issue is what are these mining with this gold export or exploration are going through the right channel? We are exporting through the right channel. If you look at the figures, we are losing billions of dollars through illicit gold laundering out of the country, and this is a very disturbing phenomenon. We've seen government decide to create a vehicle, which is the gold board, of which we'll be seeing, we'll be assessing here on Beyond the Numbers very soon to understand its operation, its impact on the market, and how it's going to reflect in terms of job creation, because we've seen they released recently the types of occupations or careers that the government is expecting to create as a result of this gold board. But one thing that is very interesting to see is the sustainability of the sector, whether the sector is wide enough to embrace the skill set in the gold industry. One possibly will say that if there are possible regulation in our mining operations, we can certainly have a system that can track. Instead of seeing what is happening now, a lot of our water bodies being destroyed as a result of galamsey. So the desperation to find gold and also the means to export or buy seems to be a bit shrouded. The gold board, according to government, is their ultimate strategy to eliminate all those loopholes in the system.
And once you are right, we will be bringing the gold board here to analyze the bill, because it's been assented by the president. It'll be interesting to see some of the safeguards and some of the way they are trying to eliminate galamsey and then promote more exports of the gold and retain more currency, more forex into the country. So that's something that we'll have to do very.
Indeed, cocoa is our ultimate gold. What's our ultimate gold until the cocoa board started experiencing a challenge? But one thing that I'm seeing here is a graph. Tell us the trend.
So Winston, the cocoa sector for the past few years has not been great. Last year we reached one of the lowest exports, cocoa exports and production we've experienced for a long time, and our revenue from the cocoa exports were also very low. So this year is very interesting because for the first 2 months of the year we've seen the highest exports since 2016. And it's interesting, but it might not really mean that we are producing more. But last year the price of cocoa went very high. But because Cocoa Board is engaged in what we call forward sales, they locked into some contracts with very low prices before last year. So even though we produced fewer beans last year, the exports the price that we sold them for were very low compared to the world markets. But since we are moving to a new year, and last year we saw, cocoa prices were up there. This year, I think the government has negotiated for a higher price with the cocoa buyers. So that's why we are seeing this possibly, because we don't have the production figures yet. But that gives us a sense of why cocoa exports are very high this year.
Trust me, the cocoa farmers are benefiting enormously based on the last pricing window that was released and the negotiation they went into government. And I think with the growth from 559 million in 2019 to 716 in 2020, we saw a dip to around 400 in 2022, which later jumped to just a marginal 639 to as high as 835 million Ghana cedis in terms of export of cocoa. So it tells you that cocoa is still a formidable resource of the nation building. We've seen a lot of projects go on because of how we've decided to trade our cocoa. At the moment, it appears our cocoa stock is basically traded on debt. And that is a key challenge. How to manage or structure the pricing and the management of cocoa, especially the finances, is a key challenge now for Cocoa Board. They have to find a way, because already the finance minister has said conclusively that indeed they have to find their own money, they have to find their own means, but government will not possibly be doving out funds to most of the institutions like they used to, because already the economy seems to be in a dire situation according to the government. But we've seen that going on.
It's so interesting because, a few days ago, there was some letters circulating that Cocoa Board had decided to maintain the producer price for farmers. And then later on, they came to the bank that they've not done that. So it's interesting to know how high the price of cocoa for the farmers will go up this year when the Cocoa Board settles.
Yes, it's still on a global market. Ghana is still playing a key role in terms of meeting global demand. But with this trade war coming on, one thing the nation should understand possibly is our competitive advantage. Right now, our deep foot is the cocoa when we go out, gold when we go out. So these two key elements, we should make sure we have the needed structures so that when we are negotiating, for instance, we can go to the meeting with the US and say, yes, we understand your cocoa industry in the US, they need this amount of supply, and yes, we understand you have placed a 10% tariff on us. What can we do? Where can you meet us within that negotiation? So government will have a bargaining chip. But if we decide not to prioritize that sector, if we decide to let go of our gold sector, mining without taking cognitive of the fact that our environment will also be affected to ensure sustainability, where are we going? These key elements are very important. Yes. So now let's look at this. And this is the ultimate goal. We're just talking about the gold. Now let's look at how much possibly in the 1st of January to February, how much are we making in terms of export of gold. Caleb?
So right off the bat, you can see that the gold exports.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember, but our total exports was about 4.3 billion. And our gold exports is 2.3 billion. This means that half of our exports were from gold.
Interesting.
Very interesting, Winston.
Let's go back to our total export, because we're then at 4.2 billion in terms of our total export as a country. And if you look at the figure, that is what we're trying to say here, at 4.2. And if you look at a figure for just gold, this is gold. This is just gold. So twice, double the price, our total export. That means gold is making Ghana phenomenal amount of money.
And also it means that the country is vulnerable, because even though gold prices have been trending upwards recently, there are instances where gold prices come down. So if gold prices were to come down, we'll be very vulnerable to that. So that's something that we should look at as diversifying our exports. And the Gold Board is also trying to add more value to our gold before we export it to get more revenue. That's also something we should look at critically.
So our refinery should be a key priority.
Exactly.
I recently saw a video of the CEO of Gold Board going to visiting some refineries, and is quite optimistic that will be a key priority. But let's see how it goes. It's just too early to say, and let's see whether indeed this time government or Ghana will decide to go to that direction, because we've been exporting raw gold consistently. Just 2.3. Anything that happens on the gold market will directly affect our revenue because of what is happening there. Because if you look at it holistically, it appears we don't have a diversified export on the international market. We basically have limited amount of options on the international market. And that put us at a serious risk. From 1.1 billion in 2023, we jumped to 1.4 with a 3 billion differential, going as high as 2.3 billion. It's huge.
That's more than 60%.
Yes.
4%.
And we can project that in the next 3 months, that possibly in the second quarter, we should see 3 times that figure, considering the trend of how important gold prices are going up. And I was making an assessment today, and one thing I foresaw is the fact that the U.S. stock market has gone down, although because of the minimal pause of Trump's decision to limit the trade between the tariff between China, it appeared that the boom has come back. And so people are trying to hide or provide safe haven for their money. And gold is the ultimate safe haven for most of investments. So people are moving a lot of their stocks to gold. So now gold prices are going up because ultimately the stock market and the bonds market doesn't seem to be stable.
Exactly, Winston.
Yeah, we've done with the gold, and the almighty Ghana cedi is a key element when we talk about how our movements, how our exports, how we tend to trade on international market. So yes, cedi is still an important factor. Caleb?
Yes. So Winston, in the first quarter of 2025, the cedi depreciated by 5.3%. And that's the lowest we've seen since 2021. That's very interesting. But also, if you remember back to that first slide, our exports have gone up very high, 4.3 billion in just the first 2 months of the year. This means that we have more forex in the country that's supporting the cedi as compared to other years. So that could be explained why the cedi depreciated, although it's a lot, 5.3% is a lot, compared to the other years where we had 22% in 2023, 7.7% last year. This is some relief, sort of. But still, we had years where the cedi appreciated, and that's what we should be looking forward to. In 2018, the first quarter of the year, the cedi appreciated by 0.26%. And in 2020, 1.7%. 2021, 0.5%. So the cedi appreciates against the dollar. That's what most people always think that it's always depreciation. Exactly.
That's interesting.
So we should get back to the cedi appreciating. And I think with gold prices going up and all the dynamics, we might see that.
And when we look at the matrix that is used in computing the pump price, the cedi is very key in that element. The international crude oil price is very key in that element. And all these factors, with how stable the cedi is, indeed, we should be expecting the price of fuel to go down. So the cedi stance, already the central bank has projected to pump or to support the BDC's bulk oil, with some amount of dollars to be able to provide or to buy on the international market. And we're sure with that provision, there should be a bit of stability going forward. And there should not be enough pressure on the reserves going into the rest of the year. So for the cedi, it appears it's quite okay for now, but there is more room for improvement. That's what my lecturer would tell you.
We need to go back to the green.
Exactly. We need a green times where we are hovering around 1.7% in terms of appreciation and 0.5% appreciation. The depreciation,
we've seen it too much.
Exactly. Year to date, depreciation right now is around 4.5%, and that is not too good, although we've experienced worse days ahead. But with what the government is trying to do, there is the need to make sure the cedi is in a very stable state. Now, government has consistently been hitting on ensuring that one of the key targets is meeting revenue means, because we've seen from the Ghana Revenue Authority that they've met their first quarter target. And that was quite interesting.
They exceeded it.
Exactly. One question I asked myself is, when have they never met their targets? Because always they keep meeting their target. However, government itself keeps telling us there is not enough funding for CAPEX there. We'll also be coming to the phone lines. But Caleb, I see surplus of 5 billion. What does he say?
So for the first quarter of this year, GRE targeted 36 billion cedis. And then the actual was 41 billion cedis. So there was a surplus of about 5 billion cedis. So then, but moving forward, the government has scrapped a number of taxes. The e-levy, there was another tax, I forgot. They scrapped the e-levy and the betting tax.
Betting tax.
The controversial betting tax. So that will affect our revenues in a way. So I'm looking forward to see how that's going to be plugged. Because the finance minister said he's doing the tax refund account to stop that gap. But then, we need to see what will happen. We're not just relying on theory and all of that. So it's early days yet, but then we'll see how the government manages with the scrap taxes.
Yes, we see how the government will manage to scrap those taxes. I just want you to understand that the phone lines have been activated. We'll be hearing from you shortly. And you just let us know your name, where you are calling from, and make sure your comments are as brief as possible. Indeed, we are making sure you have clarity of the state of the nation from the 1st of January 2025 to February. That is assessment by the Bank of Ghana. We want to understand based on just real figures that has been verified by the central bank. And by this, we are saying that as at February, the first quarter, we're experiencing a surplus of 5 billion in terms of our total revenue. Government targeted 36 billion in this first quarter, and he's been able to raise 41 billion. And the key target for 2024, according to GRA, is 400 billion.
I think it's about 220 billion.
Yes.
220 billion.
And when you made that projection, I was like, what? If we're able to reach that, then trust me, we will be having a good way, especially looking at the key infrastructure project government has prioritized for the rest of the year. Yeah. We have Richard, who is now our first caller on the line. Richard, you're live on Beyond the Numbers.
Thank you, my brother.
All right, go ahead.
I believe that looking at the way you guys were projecting our revenue, we think, I personally think that government can do better by improving or expanding our tax nets.
Okay.
Because just few of us are able to pay our taxes.
Yeah.
So they can do well by expanding the tax net.
So Richard, are you saying that you are against the scrapping of the betting tax? Because that was a very controversial one.
No.
But it's also increasing the tax net.
No.
Okay.
No. I'm for it.
Okay.
They can add another tax to what we are paying now for.
Okay. Thank you, Richard, for your insight. We have Dr. Asian Engineer, who is calling from Wager. Doc, you're live on Beyond the Numbers.
Great. If you look at the statistics presented, it shows that we have people who are highly committed to change things. When we work hard, we can get the data right. But you need people who are highly committed and who are so patriotic to make sure that Ghana will work. So these are good indicators that we need to build on. Let's hope that politics will not play major role to derail the gains that we are making. Are you getting it?
I'm getting you, Doc.
Let's pray that they will stick to the discipline that has brought these figures up so that we can build on it and have better economic figures for this country. That is where the future lies. Until the people are highly disciplined, and I'm happy with the kind of disciplinary, measures being put in place by the current president.
Oh, Doc, are you talking about the...
And I think his appointees are also, they resonate very well.
Okay, Doc.
With the president's position.
Yeah. Thank you, Doc. All right, thank you, Doc, for your opinion there. We appreciate your call, Lillian. You can also call into the numbers on the screen and let's hear what you have to say. Don't text, just call, because we will take in some few calls and let us hear your opinion as well.
I think we have time for just one call, Winston.
Yes. But it appears we have another caller as well before we get back to the data. Hello, you're live. You're live.
Hello, good evening.
Yeah, good evening, sir. Your name and where you're calling from?
I'm here for calling from Afenyo-Markin.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Looking at the analysis, please, am I
Yes,
you're live.
Looking at the analysis, the NDC government has really done well, considering targeting of 36 billion and getting 41 billion with a surplus. Then when we introduce the tax on the main routes, in addition to the scrap one, we may get more income. And at least we should still increase the service workers, our salary, because there's more surplus. We need more of the money.
All right. Thank you very much for calling. So he's saying that so long as money day,
government will pay
more. That's a good one there, But it's interesting. And I was telling that now, I recall, we're doing an analysis on the payment of the public sector workers. And I was telling you that there are many data and figures that they are quite privy of. And therefore, when they come out to say they're demonstrating on something, they know what they are standing upon. But these numbers tells us that we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, still early days.
Still early days. These are numbers that has nothing to do with output. These are numbers that has more to do basically with the price of the commodities such as gold and cocoa. So we're hoping that the output should be reflective in terms of our GDP going into the rest of the year. So from various sectors, if we see agric booming, we'll come and tell you. If we see the trade sector, manufacturing sector booming, certainly we should see those sectors reflected. But based on what we have now, it's too early to say. We are seeing domestic prices of commodities kind of being marginally stable, the CD being stable. Let's hope that the depreciation will be...
I'm waiting for food prices, Winston.
Waiting for prices.
Yeah, I want that to go down.
Awesome. All right. Any word for Kofi? Wait.
Kofi's on the beach, so he's not watching us today.
All right.
Back in 1 month.
That's a very interesting one. My producer is asking me to ask Kofi what is he doing on the beach, but trust me, it's a mystery for now. My name is Winston Taki. Thank you for joining us today for today's edition of Beyond the Numbers. We touch on an assessment of the first review of 2025. We make sure we bring you subsequent analysis and key issues. And I did this with...
I'm Caleb Ziblim, and I'll be filling in for Kofi for the next month. So.
Awesome. Also, have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy the rest of our program. Bye-bye.